The Unisa Western Cape region welcomes you to the 6th Annual Academic Development Symposium. Please join us as we take a look back at our previous symposia.
Okay, it is very important not to look at children because they're poor, or because they're black, or because they have a disability and assume that they cannot achieve like any other child. So I want to remind you before we talk about academic development and resilience about the power of learning.
COVID-19 is not the only pandemic with which South Africa is faced.
Men are supposed to be protecting us, but they are the ones who are killing us.
We are your mothers. We are your wives. We are your sisters. We are your women. To our children, we are your safe space. Ningamakhwenkwe namhlanje, ngomso niyawuba ngamadoda. Everything you want to be already exists within you. Ntombi mayizethembe. Walk in the confidence of who you've been created to be.
Thank you for joining us. The 6th Academic Development Symposium will now commence.
Right, what a wonderful day in Cape Town. And here, just a few ground rules as we celebrate the second day of the 6th Academic Development Symposium. There's attendance register floating on the question and answer panel. I want all of the delegates that attended or that is busy attending to please complete the attendance register. And here to welcome you to the 6th Academic Development Symposium, Dr. Shahida Jansen.
Good morning. Can you hear me? I'm audible. Can you hear me? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second day of the Virtual Academic Development Symposium of Unisa Western Cape Region, Cape Town. Okay, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, let me start again.
Yes, we can hear you. Shaira, please continue.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second day of the Virtual Academic Development Symposium of Unisa Western Cape Region, Cape Town. Let me remind myself and everyone else that the theme of this year's symposium is Education in South Africa during the post-COVID-19 pandemic, reflections on the readiness and responsiveness of the sector to the inevitable changes in the post-schooling landscape. Now, in his welcoming words yesterday, Professor Motata commended the Western Cape region that instead of dropping the symposium due to COVID-19, they went ahead and lifted the symposium far up into the clouds so that we can have our usual virtual symposium during these unprecedented times. It is this kind of agility of the Western Cape region that reminds me of one of the phrases used by Professor Lalendle in his opening remarks yesterday. Do not let a good crisis go to waste. And I repeat, do not let a good crisis go to waste. In his keynote address yesterday, Professor Bajnath was unpacking some of the initiatives that have been embarked on to improve, and what he shared with us, the statistics suggesting our dismal student success rates. So initiatives like quality assurance frameworks, capacity development for staff, academic development and support, and scholarship for teaching and learning are some of the many interventions, and not to speak of the taxpayers' funds that are spent on improving our throughput and output. But he asked that in spite of so many interventions, why are we not more successful? Then, ladies and gentlemen, stepping right into the fray of that question were three SRC members from the universities. The first one from the University of Stellenbosch, Ms. Luigia Nicholas, our own Siswam, Sisipo Saunders from Unisa Western Cape, and Mr. Akatutu from UCT. They reflected on the lived experiences of students and how it takes more than just learning to be academically successful. Now, Mr. Akatutu, not the Arch Desmond Tutu, but Mr. Akatutu, were explicit in making the connection between learning and material survival. And he said, with some examples, how universities are not just providing opportunities for learning, but are actually helping to meet the survival needs of the students. Now, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and Mr. Tutu made me associate to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Physical survival, as many of you are aware, is at the bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy. And learning and creativity is at the very top, which then means that universities are expected to run up and down Maslow's hierarchy, suggesting then not just scope creep, but perhaps the eclipse of the university scope. In other words, universities are not just able to focus on their core business, which now also includes responding to this pandemic, but they're also attending to the survival pandemic as referenced by these students yesterday. So unless the country is going to find a way for other sectors of the society to attend to the very real survival pandemic that millions of South Africans, including many of our students, are caught up in on a daily basis, I'm afraid that we're not going to be able to give Professor Pagenut a very good answer. Now, with that summary and reflection of yesterday's proceedings, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to whet your appetite about higher education agility and resilience in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. So today, helping us to unpack some of the practical considerations for teaching and learning within the context of student academic resilience during a period of pandemic and national lockdown is our keynote speaker, Dr. Keith Jacobs, the Regional Director of Unisa Western Cape region. Now, Dr. Jacobs is going to give us a lesson in genetics. He speaks to the importance of a quality DNA within higher education in response to the pandemic. He will then be followed by our colleagues from the unions sharing with us their unique perspective on a pandemic response. Our colleagues from our sister universities and colleges will then further enlighten us with technological, humanistic, and social advances that may help to secure our readiness for the changes in the post-schooling landscape. Now, with those few words, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the second day of our virtual Academic Development Symposium at Unisa Western Cape region in Cape Town. I hope that you are going to, like myself, leave this day today inspired, very much more aware of the steep challenges that we are facing, but fortified that, like many of the pandemics that we have been able to navigate in our South African context, this too we will be able to give our best shot. Welcome to our virtual Academic Development Symposium. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shaida Jansen, for that welcome address. She's our clinical psychologist here at Unisa Western Cape and also Deputy Director. Just a quick run through some of the housekeeping rules. For more information about the 6th Annual Academic Development Symposium, you're more than welcome to visit our online prospectus and view the abstract and biographies of all the different presenters and speakers. There's also ADS website that you can browse through in terms of all the wonderful things that's actually going to happen today. Aside from that, I just want to remind you, as in customary, there's a question and answers panel. So please post all questions in the question and answer chat. This will be moderated and according to the thematic analysis, we post our presenters a little bit later on today. Some of the house rules, please use the chat option to submit questions. Not all questions will be answered by the speaker or panel for the sake of time, and the moderator will consolidate all questions which will have a similar line of thought. Please use the platform economically to allow others to speak as well. Right, for our very first keynote address, or our second keynote address on the second day of the Academic Development Symposium, we're going to create a quality DNA for higher education, especially during a pandemic. And our guest speaker for today is Dr. Keith Jacobs. He's very familiar to us in the University of South Africa's ambit. Dr. Jacobs is the Regional Director of the Unisa Western Cape, and he holds a PhD in Engineering Management. He sat on various university academic accreditation panels, for example, the Engineering Council of South Africa, in his capacities ranging from a visit leader to mechanical team leader to member. He has chaired various bodies, and we are very, very interested to listen to what he has to say about higher education, especially a quality framework for higher education during a pandemic. Dr. Keith Jacobs, we are eager to listen to you today.
Good evening, colleagues and friends. I'm hoping that you are able to hear me. And do you see the presentation?
Yes, Dr. Keith, we can hear you.
And the presentation, is it there?
Yes, the presentation we can see, Dr. Keith.
All right. So, colleagues, morning, and it's an absolute pleasure and privilege that I talk to you today and the invitation, because this particular symposium, although I dropped a seed some years ago, is all arranged and organized by our Facilitation of Learning team, and I had no say in the matter. So when they asked me to be a keynote, it was an invitation which I gladly accepted. So I'm hoping that you are going to enjoy just a little bit, some snippets of the journey, the quality journey that I've had at Unisa, and the origins and where it is now and where I think it should be. So in this paper, I will argue that the current quality management systems, and this not only for Unisa, but for universities, are not fit for purpose in a pandemic. The lack of agility in QMSs, meaning that it is not able to cater for the rapid changes that both the multi-campus environment brings and the remote working brings. So what does this mean for education? Well, virtually most support and tuition take place via online and electronic learning, and virtual connection is the new normal. So in addition to a large proportion of staff working remotely, at least for 2020 and in future, we need to look at new ways of assuring quality assurance. So the problem here is a combination of things. It's not individual. So we have a multi-campus, and then we have a combination of that, online learning, and then we have staff working remotely. Brand new for education, brand new for management teams, brand new for quality. And unfortunately, you will note that lots of things have been sorted out. Staff members, students, but the quality systems have been left behind because somehow it is not important to many people. So many staff members are unfamiliar with working from home and feel as if their jobs will be threatened by this new normal. Everything thus far has been about staffing and students, and as so often the case, the issue of quality is neglected. So the question is, what is the missing link in quality management systems at universities that's going to create this new DNA that will assist universities to manage quality during volatile and trying times? So this is not one for this pandemic. I believe this paper is here for times when things are volatile and trying. So just to give you a little bit of theoretical framework, because I need to just frame what I'm going to say. For universities, their long-term survival depends on how good their services are, and that quality sets one university apart from the rest. But I don't believe that setting one university apart from the rest is the big thing. The big thing for me is the students need to have a quality education. And for multi-purpose higher education institutions, reflective and reflexive practices is seen as the way forward for both academics, students, and administrative staff. And there is much research that shows that reflective practice leads to better learning. So what we need to learn from this. Just a little bit of framing still, multi-campus campus universities and remote working provide a complexity of challenges that are pedagogical, economic, and logistical in nature, demanding effective leadership and administration. And lastly, in my framework, the effectiveness of multi-campus institutions is dependent on functional staff communication, educators sharing a common understanding of education, ongoing evaluation, and the moderation of learning activities, outcomes, and assessments. Have we thought about how we're moderating learning activities and outcomes and assessments in this new norm? This type of education institution is challenged to provide an efficient and effective mode of delivery to meet the staff needs of academic students and administrative staff. Now you'll see in the rest of the paper, I will be talking about how the complexity is the complex situations that we find ourselves in at universities. And I'm going to give a little bit of a case study in terms of what we experienced at Unisa. So, a little bit of the background. In 2012, the Department of Tuition and Facilitation of Learning developed and implemented a revised quality management system in support of in the support directorates and the regional directorates at the University of South Africa. And let me just say to you, this in itself was a challenge, which I will touch on a little later. The QMS was premised on two distinct approaches, namely that of the learning organization and continuous process improvement. So this QMS didn't just fall into place. It was premised on very good pillars and fundamentals. So here's some of the complexity that I want to share with you. So at the time of implementation, the DTFL consisted of 10 directorates. 3 were based at the central campus. DCLD looked after curriculum and module development. DISS looked at student support engagements, and DCCD looked at student counseling. Now, they were central directorates at Pretoria. The other 7 directorates were regional directorates in the Eastern Cape throughout the country. And you'd see that there are 2. So you've got a directorates that are stationed and are fixed in Pretoria, and then you have these other directorates that are all over the country doing very different things. Although the regional directors do often do this. I mean, there's commonality there, but definitely not with the other 3 directors. And so, which complicates it even further, that the regional directorates, there were 28 service centers around the country. These are small offices. Now, to get a QMS system that takes into consideration regional directorates and other directorates was very, very problematic. And on top of it, the 28 service centers were smaller offices and often not given the same service in terms of looking after quality as the bigger offices in the regions. So the QMS therefore had to have a multi-campus approach, given the right high-performance direction of the department. And the department was very adamant about high performance. So the directors within the department, including officers throughout the country, as per the criteria outlined in the QMS that was developed, had to conform to the same minimum standards throughout. So many fights in terms of what these standards need to be. The QMS developed was implemented in 2 cycles, namely phase 1, where the quality assurance was done using questionnaires that interrogated practices, processes, systems aligned to operations and strategic activities in the level. Now, how do we get questionnaires for all of the directors? A minimum criteria questionnaire that everybody had to buy into and accept. To where the improvement plans of these quality assurance activities had to be developed, and that in itself was a nightmare in terms of ensuring that all the improvement plans had been done and implemented. Here's the quality management system. It is a quality management system that I said was had continuous process improvement, and the learning organization as its premise. So, not going to go into quality management system because that is just to say that the QMS enables an organization to achieve the goals and objectives set out in its policy and strategy. And this is what the DTFR wanted to achieve. And obviously, if we achieved it, then Unisa would have achieved it. And we said the basis of our quality management system needs to be that quality is first. So continuous process improvement created lots of problems because this was a mechanism where you had to look at systems all the time. You had to do continuous improvement of small bits at the time. And staff and directors weren't used to this, to be visited on a regular basis, excuse me, regular basis, and assessed on a regular basis. There was large complaints about that, and I'm going to talk about it a little later. So this is what the process entailed. We identified, and we tried to get people to understand that when you got a non-conformity, it created an opportunity. It was not a problem. So it was an opportunity to improve. So then created a plan in terms of how these things were going to be improved. The execute the changes that were identified and were put in place. And then the review started again. So it was a cyclic process. We had quality assurance, quality enhancements, quality assurance, quality enhancements. And we had to go through about 2 or 3 iterations before people started buying into the process and seeing the value. So the learning organization created some issues because the learning organization says, and you had staff and you had students, staff and managers especially, who had serious problems with this. Why? Because the learning organization is very clear that it involves all people at all levels. And they all have to be involved in continually increasing the capacity to produce results that they care about. And this is all about quality. It is also characterized by recognition that individual and collective learning are key. So managers weren't used to subordinates and people on the ground giving advice in terms of how we can improve things. And people on the ground didn't have the courage and gravitas to freely and openly come up and say, this is how we should be doing things in future. This is how we can change things. So it was a real. We had to go through some serious change management, but it took a long time because we still had this top-down mentality of managers, and we had the bottom-up, difficult to understand and difficult to have enough strength and courage to be able to ensure that there's a difference. So the linear organization is an ideal towards which organizations have to evolve in order to be able to respond to various pressures. And if you look at the pandemic now, we're starting, we was probably, when we developed this QMS, we were way ahead of our time. Learning organizations where people continually expand their capacity to create results and community desire. So Senje is very clear in terms of patterns of thinking, how they are nurtured, where collective aspiration is set free, and where people are continually learning to see the whole together. Yeah, listen to this. It's the whole together. And so introducing the learning organization in this whole QMS created an opportunity for people to understand that quality is everybody's responsibility. So this first part of the talk that I'm giving is the development, how we developed and what we went through and the rigors we went through to develop a quality management system for the GTFL. And I'm going to be changing to where we're going to a little later, but this is important for us to see that when we developed this QMS in 2012, we were way ahead of the pack. We were way ahead in terms of where we are, where others are right now. So why did we premise the QMS on continuous process improvement and the learning organization? The common thing about LO and CPI is that they are both continuous. It's not a thing that we do now. If we look at our ESCOMs today, our systems breaking down, that's because, they've not introduced this kind of quality management system. CPI and LO focuses on people, which are the most valuable assets. Both approaches can be effected through commitment from all levels in the organization. Both are gradual, incremental, specifically focused, and it incorporates the refinements of existing technology. You don't need new technology all the time. It's in the existing processes and services and support and student assistance that we can make a difference. And both approaches require dedicated initiative. Now, let me just say, I have to at this point, our executive director, then Professor Mashili, supported. I was the quality chair and supported us to the hilt. And if you don't have the support from the top, then this becomes a very, very, very difficult exercise. And let me just also say to you, it was at the beginning, it was you had teams going to assess other directorates, and we've now moved on to a situation where directorates are actually assessing themselves, and so that is a major shift in terms of where we were and where we have come. We are at this moment in time. So this QMS included best reflective practice component in its practice alignment, as reflective practices were considered to be the process of lifelong learning through and from experience, which aimed to gain more understanding of the self or practice. Now let me just pause, and I'm hoping that we still have people with good memories. When we started this process, we actually started in 2011 to plan it, and we completely developed it in 2012 and implemented it in 2012. And just to say to you that it's still running right now in different formats, and we've evolved around this. But what I want to just say to you, we had to call this thing another name. There's at that stage, there was a quality department at Unisa, which is centrally based, but concentrated more on central directorates and colleges. And so we developed this for ourselves as a department, and we couldn't use the word audit, we couldn't use the word quality assurance, and so we coined the phrase best reflected practices. And when we look back today, best reflected practices, and you talk to people at Unisa and you talk about the BRP, lots of people know it, even outside of regional directorates and the DTFI. And then we started working with this, and it was a blessing in disguise that we did not succumb to not creating our own system, because the next couple of slides that I'm going to talk to you about now. So this is what it's all about. So we created questions, and let me just say to you now, the assessment questions were created by the directorates themselves. Everybody in the directorate, from the bottom right to the top, had access to these questions. And we then developed the templates, and the same questions went to all the directorates, although the central directorates, the questions and the templates and the assessment questions were nuanced to suit their activities. But in the main, the regional directorates questions were the same. And then you went out and you looked at both non-conformances and good practices, because we believe that we needed to share the good practices as well, because we had to get away from this big stick syndrome. And then the feedback report used to go back to the directorates in terms of what the assessment teams came up with. They then created the improvement plans. That was then sent back, and the improvement plans were looked at on a bi-monthly basis by the directors. And then we went back to a second visit after that to ensure that the implementation of the improvement plan took place. So in a nutshell, this is a picture of what the BRP was all about and is all about. Why reflective practice? Reflective practice is defined as thoughtfully considering your own experiences in applying knowledge to practice. It can help educators to identify how they can review and improve their teaching, which results in continuous improvement. And according to Sean, reflective practice is something to which academics and administrative staff should strive towards. But there are considerations that will have to be dealt with by the education sector before this concept can be accepted. So if one looks at when I said to you fortuitously, the use of the BRP and reflective, the best reflective practice, was a blessing in disguise. So, and I must just say that the VP at that particular stage, who was overall in charge of that department, he supported us, and he said to the people in the department, the quality department, please don't see what these people are doing. You might be able to learn from what they are doing. And then we created a fantastic rapport between the department and we continue to use the BRP as our mode of delivery. So in their study, Armstrong and Fukami 2009 asserted that reflective practices were one of the key building blocks of human learning and are situated at the heart of management and organizational learning. During the commencement of the QMS ERP activity, the primary objective of the first round of ERP sessions during 2012 were named to develop and ensure a rigorous, accountable and professional connection within regional and service-based directorates, and to provide a critical mirror to reflect on existing practices to successfully create a quality infrastructure within the open and distant. And then you can see we've already included e-learning, and that was in 2012 model of the department. So, as I said previously, the implementation was difficult. At first implementation, it caused a lot of anxiety and anger amongst staff members and managers. And in their commentary, staff questioned why their practices were being assessed on a continuous basis, since they were already experts in their practice, and their exercises of these were a waste of time. Compilation of assessment themes were questioned, because what we did is we said this directorate will go and assess another directorate, and then we rotated that. What happened was you had directorates going against directorates, and instead of working together, the one, when they went to the other directorate, they said, we will get you. And it wasn't a thing of, as I spoke about earlier, an opportunity when you get a non-conformance or an area of concern, that it was an opportunity to improve. But that changed that later. Assessment reports were questioned. Oh, to the detail, every single dot and cross, and what is meant by this, and who said that? We don't believe this. And it was a very difficult. Certain of these reports and these meetings were very, very fiery. And it was because I was the quality chair, and it was always, Keith Jacobs, that's his BRP, I don't know what he's doing. So it was quite challenging. So it produced serious rivalry. Directors struggled to share good practices, and this is what the aim of the best practice BRP was. Get the good practices, share them, and ensure that others can use them. Why must we reinvent the wheel? Share the areas of concern also, so that if you've sorted out a certain area, why must the other people struggle? So you can see how the continuous process improvement and the learning organization permeated throughout all of these things that we were doing, and people were questioning that. If I look at the going back, this particular presentation I'm doing today should have been part of a training session where people knew where it came from, and it wasn't just a thumbs up exercise to get a QMS developed. So, quality management in a pandemic. So with the onslaught of COVID-19, as we know, lives changed dramatically. Change also happened without much time to ponder. And if we listen to the speakers yesterday, it happened quick, and people had to learn very, very fast. But by creating quick fixes, we often quality falls through the cracks. So we had to self-isolate, we had to work online, off campus, traditional face-to-face academic support is put on hold. What did we do about quality assuring the online support for students, the online meetings with staff? Did we always know what staff are doing at home? We don't know, or do we know? Did our quality assistants and our workload models, did it incorporate that? So what I'm presenting now is sorry, let me just also say that QMS, the QMSs right currently are just not agile enough to cope with multi-campus and remote working environments, and that's what I'm making that statement. So how do we get it to work? We don't need to change our whole quality management system. I think what I've shared with you today is we've got a very, very, very good basis of a quality management system, premised in the right areas. And so we need to just ensure that we tweak it and add something different. And what I'm wanting to say to you is that we need to tweak, we need to include reflexivity. For a multi-campus higher education institution, reflexive practice is seen as the way forward for both academics, students, and administrative staff. And there's a plethora of research that shows that reflexive practice leads to better learning. So we should have added this in a long time ago. We didn't, but so COVID has done us a good favor. It's given us opportunity to innovate. It's given us opportunity to look at new areas. So reflexivity is the process of being aware of the situation that you are presently in and evaluating it in that moment. So I'm going to talk just a little bit. I'm getting to the slide which will just talk about reflexive and reflective. So practice, so it's a dynamic practice and has to be done continuously and as an activity happens, and happens very fast or on the spot. Thus, reflexivity is the dynamic evaluation of the experience as it happens. Don't have a lot of time to ponder, we don't have a lot of time to think about it. We need to do it, we need to act while it happens. It is a revolutionary approach to analyzing, identifying and understanding organizational challenge and creating opportunities and solutions to challenges quickly. Reflexivity is the process of being aware of the situation that you're presently in and evaluating it at the moment. At that moment, it's in the moment all the time. It is previously, Inosh was saying it's in the revolutionary approach. Philip Carroll says exactly the same. It is a revolutionary approach to analyzing, identifying and understanding organizational challenge and creating opportunities and solutions to the challenges fast. So that is what we've been missing in the previous Q&As, is looking at opportunities, solutions to challenges and acting on it fast. Reflexivity can often be confused with reflection, as stated by Enoch. Reflexivity and reflection are complementary tools, where reflexivity improves on the quality on reflective practice, where reflective practice reviews in hindsight, doing so reflexivity improves the chances of seeing the truth. So it's more than possible to have both of them work at the same time. And it has to be like that because they are complementary, making fast decisions. Reflect on that a little later. So excellence is to do a common thing in an uncommon way. And that is what we're going to have to be doing. Common things in an uncommon way. So this new norm needs an uncommon way. So thank you very much. That's my talk, and I'm hoping that you took something away from the talk today. Thank you very much. I'm not sure who talks now.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Keith Jacob, for your presentation.
Yes, what I've learned today is that common thing in an uncommon way.
Yes.
To come back to your presentation, Dr. Keith, it's very interesting on how quality management is secured within one of the biggest universities in South Africa and in Africa. And as staff are at this point adapting to a new normal, it's very interesting how reflexive and reflective practices play out, especially during a pandemic, and how we need to revisit the pedagogical, economic, and logistical nature of our practices as well. I'm just going to give over to the question and answer now. As in customary, as indicated to you earlier this morning, staff or attendees of this meeting can also forward
Jacques,
the
you're breaking up.
questions
I didn't hear anything you said now.
can also forward the questions to the moderator on the Q&A panel. So let us just look at some of the questions that were posed during your presentation, Dr. Keith Jacobs. Mr. Du, any interesting questions on your side?
Yes, Jack, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, Dr. Keith, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, thank you for being on the firing line. Yeah, thank you for being on the firing line. We've got 5 questions. I don't think we should make rounds. I'm just going to read them very slowly. Please make notes of them. Some of them are short, some are longish. So I don't want to create a second round because in my moderation, they can all be asked all at once. Okay, the first question that we got, let me just disclose that we've got 3 anonymous questions. We'll send out our hackers to find out who are these people. The first question is, communication throughout Unisa is always under fire. You can't respond for the entire university, but you can respond for your region. How did you continue to support the students and communicate with them during the lockdown period? End of the first question. Now, the second question says something I did not pick up in your talk, but somebody listened quite clearly. He or she is asking, can you explain what the consumer price index has got to do with the learning organization? That's the end of the second question. The third question is that the person understands the theoretical concept of BRP, but what it has really contributed to regions, and can you give 3 examples? I repeat, 3 examples of implemented practices. And how often do you review the practices to ensure that they are still the best? End of the third question. Now the last 2 is, I think it's Ms. Joyce Muyeza asked, and then saying, thank you, Keith, for your informative presentation. My question is it possible to adapt staff who went through merger into a learning organization mode? While she's asking, she says that the merger did not have a yardstick, and learning organization has a yardstick, and she's quoting Senge's 5 pillars. Therefore, is it possible to change people's mind and put them into a system where they will be measured? And I was going to ask that question just to abuse my Q&A status. The very last question, it says, with the WFH situation dominating the majority of 2020, how do you see the quality of service and initiatives by staff being evaluated? Can you guess what WFH means? I am told that stands for, I'm told that it stands for working from home. Can you just please confirm that you've noted all the 5 questions? And then that you can...
I have to because I have to repeat it to you because you've been breaking up quite a bit. The first one is communication. Can you repeat that?
Yes. Yeah. It says that the communication at Unisa is always under fire, so you cannot respond for the university. You can only speak on behalf of your own region, and then you have to explain how you continuously supported students and communicated to them during the lockdown period. That is the first one. And then the second one, as I said, what does learning organization has to do with the consumer price index? Is there any other question you did not hear me read out? Dr. Jacobs? Jack, can you intervene? It doesn't seem to be hearing me.
Dr. Jacobs, are you still with us?
Madhu,
Yes.
Let me just honest that I got the WFH question.
Yes.
I got the one about changing people to conform to LO. I don't know what the first one. I only know there's communication, but I don't know what communication. Is it communication to staff? Is it
to students?
Okay.
During
the one who is the support of students.
Yes. And then the fact that you cannot be communicating on behalf of the university, but you should be actually be communicating on behalf of your own region. So it's quite a lot of questions in that particular question, but the question is that you must respond through your region and how you actually have supported the students and how you communicated with them during the lockdown.
Okay, so that one I've got. That was question number 2.
Yeah. No, actually, that was question number 1. Okay, Doc, just tell me the ones that you've read, and then I will give you the other 2 that you did not get correctly.
Can I just, yeah, the one is about communication of staff. The other one is the support of students. And then there was one on the LO one I've got.
Yes.
And other one is on the WFH. So I've got 4.
Okay. Okay, answer those, then I'll give you the...
Thank you for attending the 6th Annual Academic Development Symposium.
Dr. Keith Jacobs, just answer those 3, and then I will read out the other 2. Thank you.
All right. In terms of communication to staff, it's, and if you're looking at from a regional perspective, I made an effort to communicate to staff regarding where we are at. I tried to do it on a weekly basis. It wasn't always possible, and virtually the communication I gave to staff was exactly in terms of where we are at, in terms of our regional influence, my sphere of influence in the region. You must remember that we work the policies and procedures we get from our colleagues in Pretoria, and we then follow that. And the University Estates and Dr. Sotikwa's portfolio, they were the driving force behind getting our campuses COVID ready. So we had a whole list of things that we had to do in terms of getting our campus COVID ready. And as those things unfolded, I communicated with staff. I mean, there are certain things that was very difficult to communicate because, for instance, data for staff. I had no influence in terms of who got data and who didn't get data. What I was doing was to inform the central people who needed data, and those names I gave through. So it was very difficult because we got very little information from our colleagues in Pretoria. But in terms of Dr. Sotikwa's department, in terms of getting our infrastructure ready, there we had quite a lot of information. In terms of supporting students, our facilitation of learning team did an excellent job in terms of getting students information via Teams. They were doing both academic literacies and tutorial sessions with our students online. They created an OER to assist students with ICT and computer literacy. So we did what we could do in that time, and we our team in the facilitation of learning worked around the clock. Our team in counselling were online 24/7. They scheduled their career counselling sessions, and they've not stopped working since we closed down. The same with registration and administration staff members. Online information was given and assistance were given to staff. But we had problems in terms of things out of our control. For instance, we don't control NSFAS. And so the funding issues and students' queries around funding, our people, the staff in the Western Cape were very, I mean, their hands were tied in terms of things that were out of our control. But within our control, we assisted students under very trying conditions. Because if you don't have the tools of the trade, then it makes it very. Now let me say, the question around both the communication to staff is one thing, but the communication to the students and in terms of dealing with issues around it. This is exactly what reflexivity means. We don't have the same luxury of having 6 months to sort the thing out. It needs to be done in the moment. It needs to be done now. And so when people say, yes, it's caught us unawares, if we had reflexive DNA, or part of our quality DNA included reflexivity, we would have understood very clearly what we needed to do in the moment and at the time. The thing about the learning organization, I like the question because the question is a very real question. I can tell you that in 2012, the staff members and the employees that we had and the people involved in quality, all the directorates, found it very difficult. But if you look at where we are now, we then created a community of practice for it. And the community of practice is in each sector of or areas that we work in has a community of practice. And what do? They compare practices in their field. So the councils will have got a community of practice. They meet, they talk about good practices. They also talk about concerns. They also talk about challenges that they have. And that is no managers involved here. That's councillors. That's people on the ground. So the learning organization has pushed us to the community of practice. It didn't start up front, but it evolved, and the community of practices in the main are working very well. and those include everybody. What we decided is that in terms of the community of practice, they must have one per quarter, and everybody's. So if you're talking about advisors, it's not the manager of the advisors, it's not the supervisors, it's all advisors. They then form the community of practice, and they have their sessions. And so, in a sense, we have created tools to ensure that this whole learning organization, where people from the bottom have a say in what we are doing, and that was deliberate. When I look at the work from home, you see, work from home is, I know of some other organizations where when the country went into lockdown level 2, that next morning there were work from home protocols revised, changed, handed out to staff. And one is to not be critical of Unisa altogether, because it's a big ship that we run here. But at the end of the day, we've got staff members who do not have tools of the trade to be able to work from home. And we are in ongoing discussions with this at this moment in time. Because we want to know, for instance, give you an example, we want to know staff members with comorbidities who cannot do their work from home. What is the protocol? Who verifies comorbidities? Those are all the questions that we've been asking on an ongoing basis, and it's been dealt with at this moment in time, and I'm hoping that we're going to have some responses to that. So work from home, I think that you've got people, and I didn't mention it early on, as part of the challenges of the new norm, is that people are feeling that that isolation is not good for all people. I read an article where the mental health issues are escalating during this particular pandemic. So work from home is an important question. It's a protocol that needs we need to have a university-wide protocol, and we need to be then implementing it from there. But I want to say that the staff in the Western Cape have been doing their utmost to ensure that students are serviced and supported. I'm hoping that answered the questions.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jacobs. Now there are two questions that you.
Dr. Jacobs.
And maybe I should just go back to the one on the learning organization. I think the direct question on the one of the issues that I didn't raise in the learning organization is that the learning organization requires strong leadership.
And then us.
Because if a leader is not strong, they won't be able to deal with getting everybody involved.
Program Director, can I continue with the other two questions? Program Director and Dr. Keith Jacobs.
You may. You may.
Yeah, I just wanted to inform you that the timekeeper says that we left with 5 minutes, and there are about 8 questions that have just come through. So, Dr. Jacobs, the question is CPI and learning organizations. What is the relationship there? And then the second question, you must give 3 examples of implemented practices in the regions, and just explain how do you review practices to ensure that they are still the best. And then can you allow me to add the third one? And then the other ones are, I think because of time, we will ask you to respond to them directly to the people who have asked them. But the third one that I'm adding is, how did the serious rivalry between directorates within Unisa resolve itself so that all parties benefited in the end? So those are the 3 questions. The other questions that were asked, please attendees, Dr. Jacobs will actually respond to them throughout the day, or we might in the next question and answer session after the unions, we will try and fit those questions in if time allows. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. I had a slide which spoke about CPI and LO, Learning Organization CPI, and why it was premised in that. If I just take the 2 most important, I'm not going to open up that slide again. If people want me to, I can, because there is a slide that I. But let me just talk off the cuff, and if people want to have some more information, I can gladly do so. The learning organization and CPI, the biggest commonality, the 2 biggest, I believe, is that both are continuous. That you don't have, it is not a once-off, it is a continuous process where everybody is involved. That is the fundamental, the one thing that makes it such a fantastic combination. The other one is that staff, people, are the most important asset. And because that should be the basis of quality assurance and enhancement, that it's about people. And when we're talking about people, we're talking about staff and students. It made a lot of sense to premise the QMS in those two ideologies, which is continuous process improvement and and you know, CPI doesn't want you to go improve largely and big amounts. It talks about small steps at a time. And by doing it in small steps at a time, the LO comes into play, because then you're taking people with you. You're not running away from them. So that's the answer to using those 2. But I think my abstract is available, and you'll read it much more than my presentation in the abstract. The second one is implemented practices. Maybe I should just talk about the best practices and good practices. The directorates, through the community of practices, they share good practices with each other. So it's not necessarily a good practice from the Western Cape. We are talking about all of the regions. So because you want to get everybody involved, and because we wanted to ensure that all regions raise their levels together, that their minimum requirements are raised together. So once we've sorted out the minimum requirements, we said to each other, now what are we going to do now? So now we're going to raise the bar. So we raise the bar by saying, let's look at the good practices in the different regions. We take it to a common place. We deliberate on those good practices. The regional directors have an opportunity to say, no. This is a good practice in your region, but I don't have the capacity, or I don't have the infrastructure to do what you're doing, so we can't make it a best practice. So why was that discussion happening? Discussion happened, so the Western Cape might have 30 good practices, but only 3 of them have been accepted as best practices. Why we differentiate between good practices and best practices? Good practices happen in the regions. Best practices, when they are adopted, they have to be implemented at all regions, because that's the only way you get quality up together for the whole sector. So So when a best practice is adopted, you have to implement it as a region. One of the practices that was raised by, I'll give you an example, sign language. That is one of the practices that was raised by a particular region, which was adopted as a best practice. And we've not got there yet because COVID hit us. So we need to still get involved with it. So I would have loved to have somebody right next to me doing sign language right now. It's just not, we've not been able to implement that just yet. If I look at, so that is just to give the context of good practices and best practices. So best practices have to be implemented, it's compulsory. And best practices are then evaluated and assessed by the quality committee and the quality chairs of the committees. The last one about the rivalry, how did we resolve it? We resolved it. It was a gradual. It wasn't immediate, because we had the rivalry were not only because of reports, it was also because of the teams and all of those kind of things. And we identified that we needed to do training. So we incorporated a training program for all staff in all regions. And that in itself was unreal, how the training, when people saw what we were doing and what the intentions were and how we were doing it, they then start, and often they are training together, so different regions are training with each other. We also then created the quality assurance chairpersons group, and by just bringing them together, they had a lot of influence in their quality committees at their regions. And once camaraderie between the quality chairs were built up, that was half our battle won. And then obviously, then Professor Mashili, as the leader of the department, had to clamp down on the directors, because the directors in themselves were very competitive and didn't see that this was an us thing and not a we thing, a them thing or a you thing. And once that permeated through people's mindsets, the rivalry changed. And today, we still have it. We still have quality meetings with all the directors, and we have quality meetings with the chairs, and we have co-op meetings, and people are really, really working together. Fantastic. So, yeah, in a nutshell, Chairperson, those are the answers to the 3 questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jacobs, for the broad shoulders. I think we'll put a pause on the Q&A because we've run out of time, and then I will hand over to the program director.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mdu, and thank you so much to Dr. Keith Jacobs for his insightful presentation. I want to remind participants that there will be at 12 o'clock, there will be a question and answer session later, and also questions that's not addressed during this time. We are going to attend to those via the chat function or or revert to you after the symposium. Right, it's time for coffee, I think. For coffee, I think all the participants are already eager for the early cup of coffee for this morning. So let us just recap a little bit on what's going to, or let us anticipate what's going to happen after this break. We're going to have Nahau speaking. We're also going to have APSA speaking, that's union representatives, to give us a union perspective on Unisa's response during this pandemic. And then we also got from the University of the Western Cape Professor Venetia McGee, and she's going to look at staff support during the pandemic and subsequent lockdown, and also give us some of her reflections and insights gained from learning and teaching remotely. So with much ado, let us meet each other in about 10 minutes time as we continue with the unions.
Thank you for attending the 6th Annual Academic Development Symposium. We will resume in 10 minutes. In the meantime, please enjoy the music and visual presentation. Thank you for attending the Academic Development Symposium. We will continue in 1 minute. Please stand by for the program director.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the 6th Annual Academic Development Symposium. Before the break, we were in conversation with the Regional Director of Unisa Western Cape. And since this morning, the SMS system and the WhatsApps were going off because we got organized labor as part of our Academic Development Symposium as guest speakers. So let us just look at some of their presentations. So we've got the NAHAO chairperson in the house, and he's going to present on Unisa's stance, organizational labor stance. Let me just get my screen up here. On what we encountered during this pandemic. Right, and our first speaker is Mr. Lunati Ontoti, and he's from NAHAO Unisa. He's the current chairperson of the majority union representing workers in the University of South Africa. And he's also an activist in social justice inside and outside the university, as well as a community leader, having grown in the ranks of youth and student movements. A former deputy president of the Unisa National SRC, has an unquestionable bias towards primary stakeholders in the university and the working class in general. Mr. Ontoti, before we announce you're going to take your place on the podium, we just want to remind all delegates or all attendees that there's attendance register that we want you to complete. It's on the Q&A section, so please complete that so that we can stay in contact with you even after the symposium. Without further ado, Mr. Lunati Ontoti, we wish to welcome you as part of the 6th Annual Unisa Academic Development Symposium, and we look forward to hear what you want to share with us regarding the trade union or the union and their stance during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I must say that good morning to you. Good morning to you. Good morning to the Regional Director and all the attendees who are part of this symposium. Program Director, I must also apologize to the symposium and yourself for making your life a bit difficult by not having a presentation that could be projected as I speak during the duration of my allocated time to speak. And I must also, Program Director, indicate that one is also thought that perhaps we should be able to collectively respond to the questions raised to the regional director, because I think all of us are part of the institution, and some of the challenges raised by the colleagues in the Q&As. They are very important to all of us, and as such, obviously, but we will take that opportunity that we have highlighted to then respond, to assist the regional director, perhaps maybe to elaborate more on the responses that he has made to the questions answered by colleagues. Without any further wastage of time, Program Director, I would want to say I wanted to phrase my presentation as the advent of COVID-19, an opportunity for a human-centered future of work and a service-oriented post-schooling system. Program Director, the global health pandemic of COVID-19 that led to the pronouncement of a national shutdown under the strict rules imposed by the Disaster Management Act in the country, and similarly in other parts of the world, has once more proven to all of us the disparities between the two contending classes in our society, meaning Program Director, obviously those who are at the lower level of the food chain have once more been exposed, and the clear economic challenges have shown themselves for all of us to see, even within the students and workers alike. It is the working class that has had to shoulder the brunt of retrenchments and the brutal economic exclusion at the height of this pandemic, leading to some losing their lives to excessive substance abuse, depression, and other related sicknesses. An often forgotten dimension of this global crisis is its impact on the migrant workers, whose labor ensures that vital sectors and services of our economy are running properly. We observed with agony how the economy was closed and these workers were left to fend for themselves without any financial protection and relief strategies. I would have wanted to solely pay particular attention to the impact of this pandemic on workers in the higher education sector or the University of South Africa, but certainly as a leader of an organization that organizes beyond the sector with an internationalist outlook, one has been exposed to its manifestations and its ripple effect endured by these workers, be it frontline workers or otherwise. And I think we spoke about, there was tentatively, the regional director did talk to the mental health, of workers and students, by the way, during the lockdown, more especially at level 5 and at level 4, when things were really tough. We could not make enough movements. So the pandemic has laid bare for all and sundry to realize the vulnerability of the global model of trade and production in both its content and form. Its strengths and weaknesses have been exposed, which is an opportunity for all social partners to effectively agitate for a brighter future for the organizations and all the workers in their employ. If the doctrine of never let a good crisis go to waste is explored, this crisis presents both challenges and opportunities for both organized labor representing workers and managers alike to reimagine the workplace as well as the future of work at the present moment and beyond this period. It is an opportune moment to engender a collaborative approach between organized labor and management in various institutions towards a human-centered future of work that is grounded on the fundamental principles of co-determination in both planning and execution. Program Director, as a sector charged with the noble responsibility of knowledge production, we must conduct more studies to better understand the effects imposed by this pandemic to women and youth workers, given the precarious nature of their employment statuses in general, because it is sadly true that the ongoing retrenchments might affect them more, noting that they are mostly in casual employment, working through agencies and under poor working conditions. Within the very institutions of higher learning we reside in, it is the youth and women who are in their majority employed as fixed-term workers or temporary employees, both in the academic side and the administrative side of the institution. It is thus an opportunity for us to balance the student and lecturer ratio by employing more academics in response to the growing numbers of students in our universities and TVET colleges. Coming back to the theme of this symposium, Program Director, that imposes on all of us to reflect on the readiness and responsiveness of the sector to the inevitable changes in the post-schooling landscape. One will avoid by all means possible the temptation to abuse the platform by reducing it into a grievance or a complaints lekgotla. Within the same context, Program Director, and at the risk of being unpopular, allow me to state that the sector has been caught napping by this pandemic, and as such, it has had to play catch up on something that is, in my subjective view, within its purview, because innovation towards a multidimensional strategy of teaching and learning should have been led by the sector in order to influence the economic direction of the country that is currently or predominantly driven by industry. Colleagues, it is us in the higher education sector who should assume the frontline trenches of driving the discourse of artificial intelligence, e-commerce, and so forth, including the direction assumed by the fourth industrial revolution and redefining the post-schooling landscape for the present and the future of scholarship. Program Director, I am of the firm view that the concrete social and economic conditions of workers and the working class in general will not change if the base and superstructure of the economy is not fundamentally tampered with to ensure that all social partners are agile and adaptable to the post-pandemic realities. The post-schooling landscape will comprehensively respond to the needs of students and workers alike if a social compact is agreed upon by all social partners with a singular commitment underpinned by the principles of collaboration, adaptability, agility, sound communication, change management and leadership, relationship management, a service-oriented approach, and so forth. The sector needs to re-engineer itself and formulate a systematically coordinated approach towards the strengthening of our institutions, governance, leadership, and management in order to respond to the technological advances that need to be made in response to the needs of the sector broadly. Program Director, USAF makes the following observations relating to some challenges in our universities, and I wish to sharpen the contradictions by naming them just to trigger discussions and debates around the post-schooling responses that will come out of this symposium, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to deliberate and come up with clear-cut recommendations. Program Director, USAF makes the following observations towards the challenges faced by the universities. One, governance failings in respect of council functioning. 2, fraught relationships between councils and the VC and other members of staff. 3, ineffective institutional structures such as Senate and institutional forums. 4, management failures and challenges in areas such as HR, finance, with some cases obviously residing within the registrar's portfolio. And they make these observations, Program Director, for instance, on the question of governance failings in respect of counseling functioning, the composition of our councils broadly in the sector, the expertise that are there within our councils? What type of people do we have in councils? Do the people that we have in council fully appreciative of the sector, or we simply put people in our councils who come obviously with the views only of seeking to be consultants? What is the vetting process that therefore takes place for one to be member of council? These are some of the things, because one, I would not want to solely focus on the Western Cape, because Unisa Western Cape forms part of the broader university, and obviously decisions taken at a higher level, they cascade down to regions, and some of the challenges, and I will, when we respond to some of the questions raised by colleagues, try to link what I'm saying relating to council composition and the challenges that we face when we are not paying attention to these important governance structures, relating to how we are going to respond to the post pandemic realities. To the relationships between the council members or council on its own with the vice chancellor or the executive members of staff. Is the relationship sound? How is that relationship? These are some of the things that we must also look into and try to reflect on, just to try and understand broadly how these affect universities and colleges alike. The ineffective institutional structures, such as Senate and the Institutional Forum, how are these structures utilized in the institution in terms of shaping the teaching and learning and the academic program of the institution? Do these structures really, are they given enough decorum that they deserve? Are these structures respected? Are these structures having good relations with the structure that they seek to advise, which is, in this case, is council? The management failures and challenges in areas such as HR. Program director, one question that we must also ask and respond to perhaps at a later stage of this symposium, or even beyond the borders of this symposium, is our HR processes, right from the top going down. Do we recruit the type of staff members that are aligned to the cultures of the institution? Is our recruitment processes aligned to our strategies as an institution? So when we recruit staff members, do they really understand the vision and mission of the institution? We've got some examples that we could provide, but obviously we will not do that. But the question then arises is, how do we then, our HR processes, how do we then re-engineer them? Because talking to the post-schooling challenges and how this is going to affect the students, it is important, because in whatever that happens, students become the victims of whatever that takes place in the institution if we do not recruit the staff members with the requisite skills, with the correct temperament, with the understanding of the vision and mission of the institution. So it's a very critical space that we obviously have to not to let go of beyond this pandemic, because we should have obviously led this process, as I said earlier on. We should have led the process of how do we then conduct teaching and learning under the processes or under the conditions of a pandemic such as COVID-19 that locked us down. Are our systems proper? And how do we then recruit staff members who will assist the institution in ensuring that we've got such systems that will obviously not compromise the quality of qualifications that we are going to produce, but the systems will enhance or enable the institution to deliver on its mandate. Now, Program Director, all of these challenges observed by USAF are an integral part of the future we seek to reimagine here in this symposium, and if the attitudes do not change for the sake of the sector and the students its services, the future is thus under threat. As a parting short, Program Director, allow me to further highlight similar observations made by DHED with respect to the systematic problems faced by our institutions of higher education, namely the inability of councils, in some cases, the chairperson to provide strategic leadership and direction. Number two, role confusion between governance and management. Number three, fraud council vice chancellor relationships, structure and composition and size of these councils. Failure by members to distinguish between the interest of the institution and the interest of the constituencies which elected or nominated them. Non-adherence to governance procedures. And lastly, they cite, I'm not sure why they cite corruption as the last as the last point, but I'm not necessarily a program director raising these things in any case, in any manner saying that these are the challenges faced by the university or Unisa rather, but I'm just taking from what the head has given us in terms of all the universities that we have seen previously going under administration. Some of them even today they are under administration. Some of them is a second or a third time being under administration post the democratic dispensation, which obviously warrants us to be more worried and to be more careful and to obviously guard with jealousy the national asset that we are currently in charge of, in this particular instance, the University of South Africa. And Chair, on the question of the inability of councils, in some cases, the chairperson to provide strategic leadership and direction, which obviously, Chair, it's something that we obviously have to look at. What criteria is used for one to be given such a huge responsibility of providing strategic leadership and direction in the institution? An institution as big as Unisa, because Unisa is not a small institution, it's a very huge institution, and as such, if you do not have the correct, the correct skills or ability to steer such a big ship, you are obviously going to find yourself in trouble. and we obviously have to, as social partners in the institutions, in the institution, and also as students in the institution, as workers in the institution, as South Africans, we should pay a particular attention to the form of criteria used or the caliber of people that come into our councils, because governance structures, as I said, Program Director, earlier on, they are very critical. The challenges faced by Western Cape as a region can never be divorced from the rest of the challenges that are faced by the institution broadly, because in any case, the Western Cape region is not a federal state whereby decisions can just be taken by the director without aligning those decisions from the decisions taken in the main campus. So in essence, Program Director, it becomes very critical that we pay a particular attention in our discussion when we discuss this matter to also look into the governance structures. The role confusion between governance and management, it does occur on numerous occasions. I think all of us would have read reports emanating from various institutions, who would have read newspaper articles where governance structures are accused or alleged to encroach themselves into management decisions. And I think also, Chair, also on our side, we have had some of those traits creeping in the institution, but fortunately you have got unions who are agile, who are always ready to confront any wrongdoing that is against the basic principles of governance. So this is one thing that we also have to look at, Chair, but not only at taking a linear approach of only looking at the University of South Africa, but I thought that we should look at it broadly because it becomes quite important in the higher education sector. And I say this, Chair, because I do not view Unisa as an island. I view Unisa because as part of the broader sector that is led by DHET. The structure and the composition and size of our councils, perhaps it's something that we also have to look at just to check if indeed such a governance structure entrusted with such big responsibilities, the structure on its own, its composition and size, does it talk to the material conditions and the challenges of the institution? So it's one dimension that we obviously have to try to delve into. The failure by members to distinguish between the interest of the institution and interest of the constituencies which brought them to council is something that also becomes a serious problem, which also leads to, in certain instances, if you read the reports properly, you'll find that in some of the disbanded or institutions that have been put under administration, there are accusations or allegations of council members forming factions and therefore taking the interests of factions or cliques or interest groups and above the interests of the institution, which obviously becomes the question of then the governance of ethics and the ethics of governance alike, where now there are no ethics and sustainability of the institution is not taken into consideration. And of course, program director, ethics and sustainability can never be divorced from each other. The non-adherence to governance procedures is something of great interest to all of us, because we expect that the processes or the machinery of the institution should be seamless, moving right from the ground to the top or from the top to the ground in a more legal where there is no law that governs certain things or policy measures. Obviously, there is the right thing to do as prescribed by the best practice of governance. Corruption is also highlighted by DHET as part of the reasons. Yes, sir.
And you got about a minute left.
Oh, sorry. I'm almost done. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that, Program Director. Lastly, Chair, Program Director, allow me to request that you forgive me for not strictly following the theme as per the directive of the theme, but I saw it necessary to raise the above issues to provide a more diverse engagement, and I wish the symposium success in its deliberations, with the hope that it will not be a talk show, but will emerge out of the symposium with sound recommendations to help the sector and the university to respond to our future needs. I thank you, Program Director. I think because I was left with a minute, I tried to quickly summarize before my minute was up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ontoti, and thank you so much for humanizing what the what unions are doing. I think usually when you think about the union, you think about the radicals, but it's actually intellectuals with heart. And so thank you for cementing that. Yes, so we need to move over to our next presenter. Please stay attuned, Mr. Ontoti, because people are busy responding to the questions, the question answer button. So they would like to deliberate and engage with you a little bit later on at roundabout. Let me just look at the possible time. At roundabout 12 o'clock, they wish to engage with you on further issues regarding how the union supported or what the union's responses were in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're going to move over to our next presenter, and that is the chairperson of Unisa APSA, and that is Johan Jonker. Johan Jonker is an academic at the School of Criminal Justice at the College of Law at the University of South Africa. He obtained qualifications in both law and management and has been teaching law and management modules since 1995, resulting in extensive multidisciplinary knowledge and expertise. He co-authored 4 academic books, authored several training materials, as well as comprehensive study guides. He presented many papers at both national and international platforms and presented training and short courses in strategic management, criminal justice, and human rights to senior public officials. His teaching experience are very much complemented by legal management and leadership experience over the last 15 years. He is the chairperson of APSA Unisa as one of 2 recognized unions at the University of South Africa. He contributed significantly to the collective drafting and amendment of several university policies and procedures, and he contributed to the drafting and amendment of legislation as well. So, Mr. Johan Jonker, we'd like to hear your perspective on the Unisa's response to the pandemic.
Thank you, Program Director. I'm just loading the presentation.
While the presentation is loading, I just want to invite all the delegates or attendees to please post questions on the live event question and answer button that you'll find on the tab. So we can also pose these questions to the union representative and the academic a little bit later on at 12 o'clock this afternoon.
Okay, can you see the presentation?
We can see it. Thank you so much, Johan.
Thank you. My apology, Program Director, with regard to issue of camera. I have a challenge there with regard to a camera which is broken on a laptop, and it's unfortunately unable to have corrected that before the symposium. So my apologies that I can't. You won't be able to see me, but I think there is a photo somewhere on that in the program. Thank you very much. Let me commence. I think we would, as indicated, one represents APSA in the sense of at Unisa. I will be speaking from a perspective of Unisa, although there will be a slight touch on wider into higher education. It's also a national union, but my focus will be Unisa as such. The theme, of course, is clear to everybody. It's within the theme and within the theme, the union's perspective on Unisa's response to the pandemic. So the focus of the presentation is really the response of Unisa, and in that response of Unisa, I include the response of both the management of Unisa and organized labor. as well as the student bodies. But I'll be focusing on Unisa and the unions as such. The perspective on Unisa's responses to the pandemic would obviously appear to be different for different stakeholders. And that is simply because the different stakeholders, we have senior management, we have middle management, employees, and employees are diverse in terms of academic and support. And then we've got organized labor, the recognized unions, and of course, student representative structures. One would assume that when you ask the question, how did Unisa respond to the pandemic, you may get different answers from different stakeholders. And hopefully there will be some overlap in that regard. I'll be focusing, of course, on the perspective from organized labor, and in particular, of course, from ABSA as a union. So when one speaks about management and the perspectives there, they obviously had different interest than what we as employees may have. Even academic employees may have had different interest and support employees. If you just contrast, for example, academics who had to do online exams and the staff of exam section who had to support and working from home and all the challenges that it created in that regard. From a management perspective, one would assume that meeting online would have been serious challenges for them as well, but perhaps less than it would be for employees, especially employees on a lower salary scale, etc., which find it more difficult to afford online access, etc. Regarding organized labor, of course, we are unapologetic about the notion that our first priority, despite our interest being the interest of the university, and that we all work towards promoting that interest, we're unapologetically having as a priority the interest of employees at heart, and especially on all levels. The employees in Unisa are quite diverse. We have members being academics, support staff, staff in security and cleaning, etc. Who has a few years back being insourced from very difficult circumstances, and at least most of them today enjoy a remuneration 3 times what they earned when they were before insourcing. The focus areas are union intervention or contributions during pre-lockdown phase. There would be specific indications of how we experienced the situation even before lockdown happened, based on media, based on some research regarding international tendencies, etc. Then there are challenges affecting initial responses to the pandemic. The challenges that was faced from us as unions dealing with the situation of initial response. There was a significant impact of the President of South Africa and the Minister of Higher Education and in their announcements, because it had an impact on Unisa as such. The impact of Unisa response having effect far beyond employees and students is an aspect which one would dwell on a little bit, because contrary to maybe popular view, this was not whether or not you decide to work from home was not only showing care for your employees, for example, but showing care for or having to consider the impact that not doing so would have not only on those employees, but also in the community they go to and so on. Then you have the situation of contradictions and conflicting interests in the whole aspects. Many misperceptions that one identified, and different considerations for different areas like main campus, Florida campus, and the regions. Factors that unions, in particular, ABSA as such, who's Alpha I speak. I can't speak on behalf of both unions, but of course, as organized labor, we sometimes collaborate and get the same, have the same experiences. Emphasize to influence decision making by union management. What did we do to try and influence management in making certain decisions? Because it was not really negotiations from the start. It didn't start very well. There was a constrained relation. As everybody may recall, there was a strike not long before the lockdown started, or when the pandemic started to face us in terms of the risk. The Unisa Bargaining Forum, UBF, and negotiations during the lockdown is another focus area. In terms of union intervention or contributions during the pre-lockdown phase, there were certain things that the unions were doing which was even totally unguided, because there was a time when it was just announcements from WHO and other countries and so forth, and statistics that you were learning about that gave you guidance regarding the problem that may be coming. Before the first case in South Africa was identified, there was, of course, not much that you could be guided by, except for the planning that was shared by the Department of Health and so forth. But the real risk, of course, were more realized, more understood as South Africa started to have its first cases, etc. The initial reluctance by management to close campuses or reduce staff numbers accessing campuses is something that one would assume had to do with a number of factors. One might not say as a fact that they were reluctant, but that was at least our perception as labor, that or as unions, that originally there was not a keen decision made to close campuses and keeping campuses open until such time as there were more specific risk identified, etc. The challenges affecting initial responses to the pandemic, those challenges I'll go into a little bit more detail, and then I have already indicated the issue of the significant impact of the President of South Africa and the Minister of Higher Education when they made their announcement. That had an impact on the initial reluctance as such. I've already touched on misperceptions. I think I will deal with the misperceptions at a specific space, but there are some examples that are highlighted, and then, as indicated, the main campus, Florida campus, and the regions. The factors that unions had to influence decision-making, let me just touch on that to start with. We were using access to statistics, using access to other countries, etc. Sometimes having to make claims of risks which were not necessarily easily not easily possible to convince on, because there was so much going on in the world that you had to be very careful that things are not fake news and so forth. And there was also a difficulty, of course, of convincing that a certain source is reliable. When you identify certain risks from reading certain material, there was always a little bit of a difficult to convince that those sources are reliable. If it's not linked to WHO or Department of Health in South Africa. Challenges, more specifically, the initial reluctance by Unisa to close campuses, we believe, may have been impacted by the fact that there was a strike not long before the pandemic hit us, or that there were strained relations. Not to say that management decided not to close because of a strained relation, but the strained relations did have an impact on engagement, did have an impact on constrained engagement in the beginning. And there may have been a possible perception, one assumes, that when you allow people to be off campus just after a strike, it's almost like allowing a strike to continue. It's a mere perception, but that possible perception may have played a role. Of course, we are not claiming it did, but it is something that could have had an impact. The presidential lockdown announcement, of course, made things very clear. So whatever the decisions were considered or and so on were. Can I just check? I see there's bad network quality indicated on my screen. Can you hear me clearly?
We can, Johan.
So I'm not breaking up or anything. Thank you.
No.
Clara, there was an original indication that the minister's announcement may not have included Unisa, for example, but the president's lockdown ultimately clarified the whole situation, and whether or not particular decisions were banned in a certain direction, it was obviously going to be difficult to decide otherwise when there is a lockdown, and that's where the issues of you even had to. I mean, you could even be arrested even if you had a permit to go to Unisa if you don't have your permit with you. So there are many factors like those that played a role. The ministerial indication to shut down Unisa interpreted originally as being excluded. However, it was excluded in the sense of not being a residential university regarding residences and things like those, and perceived to be excluded because Unisa didn't have to close its business as such. But at some stage it was maybe perceived as work should continue because of the nature of the institution being the ODEL institution and so on. But ultimately, most staff of Unisa were working from home. Most staff, some was unable to because of the nature and the very nature of their job, not making it possible to work from home. Other challenges were communicating with members were constrained because many members had no laptops. Many members had no laptops, had desktops in offices. And when you are then working from home, some may have had private laptops, others didn't. Some may have had laptops, but very limited internet access or connectivity. You were constrained with access to email, and of course, as unions, you've got the email addresses of your members as Unisa email addresses. Some, of course, have provided you with other alternative emails, but it's not. It was communication was constrained, so we had to find quite a number of alternative means, etc. But constrained it was indeed. Then the issues of perceptions relating to constrained supervision. We had to deal with a lot of issues regarding line managers or management in general. Some who find it difficult to conceive the notion that somebody is working even though they are not seen to be working, or that they need to throw them with many requests for reports on let's say reporting on a weekly basis, but sometimes requesting more reports than they actually give instructions what to do. We had to intervene in many disputes which could have escalated badly, but maybe the management would hopefully be appreciative of the fact that we have actually taken away a lot of strain from them by dealing with some of these things before it escalated. Because one could have identified these are perceptions and it's isolated and so forth. There are always not a matter of everybody believing in the same way, and you often find that some would be more liberal in their thinking and others very conservative in their thinking. There are indeed, unfortunately, line managers in the institution who really believe that if they don't see you working, then they perceive you are not working. The issues of outcome-based or task, can I say, outputs to be measured or to see what you do are for some not as important as to see that you are busy doing something. Now, the UBF did not sit for the first month, and that was a serious problem because obviously we could not meet physically during the lockdown. When the lockdown started, it took quite some time. We had those initial constraints to meet. We had to find some innovative ways of collective engagement because it doesn't make sense to speak as an individual with management. You need to be able to speak in a platform where you can, you can express yourself collectively, because it's not seen to be very appropriate when one leader speaks to management and other leaders cannot participate in the same discussion, or you must make turns who speak and so on. So those constraints, teleconferencing was attempted at stages, but it's not very effective, especially not for bargaining, negotiations, etc. Organized labor had to insist on UBF to start, and the reason for that is that there was it was slow to start to have meetings scheduled, and once we saw, but council is meeting, and there were occasions where some of the leadership of the unions, including both the chairpersons, were invited to be in council committee workshops. Obviously, we saw that the system is working, that we can engage And we had to start asking questions if council can meet, if management can meet with each other. Then certainly the Unisa Bargaining Forum can also meet in this manner. Of course, there were some serious things to consider when you talk about bargaining online. It is not as if you can go into a caucus in a room next door and have a confidential discussion about your strategy or your next move, etc. You know, to be safe from. We had to find ways. Of course, later we did find that to by way of the platform, go out and go into a different. What do you call it? In a different call, in a different meeting or a different Teams meeting. But you know, there are things like a mic being muted when you talk. Sometimes a mic not being unmuted when you say something which you should, which perhaps it shouldn't be heard. And there are many constraints that would originally or normally not happen, Program Director, when you are in physical bargaining. There are many factors there which has an impact. Those are just a few examples of it. The university workshops, COVID-19 had a clear indication of some thinking in the university at the time, even in the first part of the lockdown, in identifying risks on a strategic level. Very quickly, the risk of remuneration and salaries, etc., were identified by some as risk and started to have conversations on should remuneration stay the same when some people are not working, when there seems to be less productivity, when people, as I indicated earlier, are seen not to work, or they see not to work because they are not seen working. All of those type of aspects, and then the predictions for the future, etc. And things like, will there be so many buildings needed? Will we need so many offices? Those were all relevant questions to ask, of course, but we found it quite contra our interest. And the discussions in the university initially posed risks for organized labor because the type of discussions, if not engaged on from organized labor, could have led to perhaps initial strategic decisions that could have been more risky for labor. Fortunately, we were able to intervene, and I'm talking about both unions here. We were able to intervene quickly at the conversation level when risks were identified, for example, of salary cuts, where we had to quickly respond and saying, this is not, Unisa is not a hotel industry, or it's not this type of company, it's not that type of company, and so forth. And therefore, the risk should be seen as low, that there should be salary cuts, etc., things like those. And because of that lower risk, you can imagine if a risk is identified as a high risk, then subsequent to that strategic planning, when people read documents that says salary reduction is a high risk, then some people will perceive it as it's imminent to happen, and then when something is perceived as imminent to happen, they may even think it's necessary to happen. So we think that at least we had some positive effect in terms of what we had to share with management in the beginning, and that it may have had influences on strategic thinking, not going in one direction only. Certain misperceptions, that was a challenge for us. Some members of unions, I speak of my own members, especially members in essential services, had remarks to make, of course, not on a collective basis expressed by many, but you had the odd exchanges where people were expressing themselves in social platforms and so on, saying management and leadership of unions do not care for some of us, because the perception is created that academics and other staff are allowed to work off campus. Yet some of us have to work on campus. We are forced to be at work in the workplace. And even when COVID cases are identified, we are still forced to be there. And of course, we had to share with them that we never agreed to them having to be there when a COVID case is identified and they must stay in the building and things like those. Those were not at any stage negotiated with us, nor did we agree to any such things happening. We had to, of course, explain the other side of the coin, namely that the mere fact of essential services was also not determined by us, but by the minister, when there was an indication of what essential service in higher education would need to operate despite the lockdown, etc. So we had to face challenges from both sides, management taking certain decisions that may put our members at higher risk than other members on the one side, and then misperceptions on some members' side, where it comes down to maybe perceiving less care for them because of the fact. What we had to explain, for example, to members in that regard, for example, especially in maintenance, in security, cleaning, but more particularly, of course, in clinic services, that being all essential services and health workers in the institution, obviously the same as health workers in other spaces. What we managed to do in our view is that although we could not secure that security workers, cleaning staff, and of course clinic staff, for example, maintenance, could be off campus, by having fought hard and having engaged deep with management in terms of not allowing other staff to be on campus, and in fact be very strict not to allow staff to come to campus, was putting our members who are at the front line, so to speak, at less danger. Because the more people who come to campus, the more it put those people who are forced by the nature of their job to be on campus to be exposed to risk. And I'm not sure that everybody always realizes those factors when you reduce the numbers, etc. There were challenges regarding perceptions and lack of.
Mr. Jonker.
Yes.
You've got around about 2 minutes left.
Thank you. There were cases of whether the virus was airborne, for example, the issue whether it was transmitting asymptomatically and all of these things. And in the beginning, those were big challenges because it is not as if you could insist or demand that this and this must happen because you can claim it is definitely airborne. What we simply argued with management was to just keep on arguing on enhanced risk, arguing on issues such as the PPEs that we were hoping better ones would be given. And then finally, when WHO admitted, or confirmed rather, and confirmed by higher health as well, that indeed the virus is airborne, one of the management representatives stated, "You'll be delighted to know that the virus is confirmed to be airborne as you claimed." And we had to respond because it was like on record, and we had to respond because it sounded as if it just sounded strange, and we had to respond, "No, we're not delighted. We're just glad and relieved that we are now taking this risk into account." The issues of contradictions and conflicting interests, I've touched on some of them already. Being on campus, some staff members insisting to be on campus. The strict permit system, some staff members complaining about the strict permit system. And of course, you have to look at this, the first priority as unions, and that's the safety and the lives of staff, with all the other balancing factors, but most specifically, the safety and saving lives was the priority. Some insisting to return to work because of a fear of retrenchment, a risk of being perceived not to be needed. If you're off the campus for a long time and you can't really do work, and there's a perception of lesser productivity, that puts pressure on people to not to want to return to work, and then it creates misperceptions. Because it creates misperceptions that people want to be rather at work than at home. And sometimes it's even being opportunistically misinterpreted or opportunistically placed as an example of how people want to be on campus, as opposed to perceiving undue risk, etc. Well, not necessarily undue, but a concern. Then there's issues of some adamant employees who said, of course, no tools of the trade, no work. we had to deal with that in a very delicate manner because there's this competing interest, there's this balance that had to be obtained. The complaint of not having a laptop was sometimes skewed as a perception created that a person prefers to be in an office because the way that they complain may be interpreted in a way that says, I rather be in my office than struggling now from home without a laptop. Whereas the real issue that needed to be addressed is obtaining a laptop. Some issues of people testing positive and then recuperated, wanting to return to work. There's perceptions of rejection. Now, of course, you need to determine, is it real perceptions or is it perceived? Because it may be natural that when somebody has tested positive, you return to work, your colleagues seem to be reluctant to be near you. You know, there's a fine line between blaming your colleagues for keeping a distance and feeling really rejected, or whether intentionally your colleagues may be rejecting you or, you know, stigmatizing you, etc. So those are serious challenges that we need to look at going forward. Encouraging people to come back. Some line managers went as far as saying, if we don't come back to work, we may put our job in jeopardy, sharing that with staff members. Is that manipulative? Is that maybe too assertive? It's those things are problematic. Strictly keeping people off campus initially. The permits signed on a very high level. I can also, without fear of contradiction in this regard, give compliments and credit to the management for following this issue of permits being signed on a very high level and being very strict on it. We believe that it limited the number of cases at Unisa. It prevented lots of cases, even we can even go as far as saying in the country, because if you look at all the regions, the main campuses and other campuses, it would have had a serious impact if people were easily allowed on campus, etc.
Mr. Jonker?
Yes, Program Director, I'll complete.
Time is actually lapsing and the next presenter is queuing already.
Okay, can I just finish in 1 minute? If you don't mind, I just need to conclude this. We had certain PPE challenges when we were trying our very best to convince management to get N95 masks. We demanded higher quality PPE for frontline employees, specifically because they are more exposed to risk, or then even if they're not frontline, but like security, working at access control, having to contact with more people and so on. Same with the clinic staff and cleaning staff, especially cleaning staff who needed to clean areas where there may be risk, specifically involved, like a building where there was a positive case reported, etc. Unfortunately, we failed to convince management in this regard, and the perception that was created almost of unlawfulness to obtain N95 masks played a role here. The minister has made a plea that only health workers must be buying or getting, the public must not buy those things and so on. And therefore, Unisa also perceived that to say they can't go and procure N95 masks, etc. What we did in that regard was writing to the dean of CSET, the College of Science, and requesting whether they can do some investigations and research into whether there's not a chance for the college researchers to perhaps see whether they can produce N95 masks. Those things have culminated in further engagements, and they are progressing into a direction. It also helped in the sense that hand sanitizers were being produced by the College of Science. Originally, there was a problem that alcohol ran out, and then there had to be an agreement with specifically with SA breweries, who then gave hundreds of thousands of bottles of expired beer from which alcohol could be extracted. And that was some innovative initiatives which we applaud as well from union side. Lastly, the issue of air conditioners. There was risk enhanced by certain types of air conditioning systems, and of course, when the virus is airborne, there's immediately an enhanced risk regarding air cons and so on. There's questions about centralized systems, recirculating air versus system that may be circulating air from one space to another. The issue of replacement and cleaning of filters. And the very point that we are making is that the risk about air conditioners is now higher than before. Although the numbers in the country has declined, more staff returns to campus, then issues of air cons and so forth becomes higher risk. And the thermal cameras is the last point, Program Director. Opening was initially subject to acquisition of thermal camera systems, but unfortunately, the decision changed due to procurement challenges. We need to engage on the way forward with management in that regard, because again, we believe that the absence of thermal cameras will be posing a higher risk now than before, because the more numbers on the campus, the more feet on campus later on, the more the risk would be. I will close. I will not go into the statistics, Program Director, except for saying that the biggest challenge we had at the stage was the contradiction when the issue of risk and assessment was, the issue of risk assessment included the fact that South Africa was 4th in the world on a few days, both in terms of new cases as well as the total number of cases, I think 5th in the world, and the number of new deaths was also very high, etc. Those were probably the most challenging time. I thank you, and I just say that this presentation was done without prejudice to any rights of the Union Audits members. Thank you, Program Director. My apology for taking a little bit longer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johan Jonker. Thank you for highlighting the key focus areas. We really appreciate your engagement, and you really gave us some food for thought there. Right, so our next presenter is most probably awaiting in the midst. Let us just get her on board, and she's going to be the academic voice. So this is Professor Venetia McGee, and she's an academic development practitioner at the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences at the University of the Western Cape. She holds a PhD in education from Stellenbosch University. Academic disciplines consist of education, linguistics, and literacy, and she's an expert in student learning and student retention. So Venetia is going to look at staff support during the pandemic and the subsequent lockdown, as well as giving her reflections and insights gained from learning and teaching remotely. Professor Venetia McGee, it's over to you.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Program Director. Good morning, attendees. Thank you very much for inviting me and for asking me to participate in our symposium this year. It's always a privilege and very nice honor to be part of something so important. Thank you also for going, the different route. Since we are in lockdown, technology has proven to help us to still connect. Today, my presentation will focus on how staff, responded and the impact of the pandemic and the subsequent lockdown on our academics as staff, but also I think our support staff and our professional staff. Let me go to the next slide. How do I do that? Try and see over there. Okay. So, lockdown 2020 happened. As we can all remember, that the president announced that there will be a complete lockdown from midnight 26th of March 2020. And first we had to stay at home for 21 days. And after that, we realized that it's not going to go away, and everyone was planning to start working from home. And then all the universities, nationally, regionally, and globally, move on to online learning and teaching. And we had to use educational technologies that resulted in remote learning and teaching. Thus, my discussion will center around 3 questions. The first one, what was the impact of the lockdown on academics? The second one, how did they adjust? So how did we adjust to online learning and teaching? And then thirdly, what forms of support were and are still provided to the academics and the staff? First question. What was the impact of lockdown? It is actually interesting because I was reminded earlier that last year I had a presentation on is higher education ready for the fourth industrial revolution? And this year it actually happened. The lockdown completely shut everything down. And yes, because we are human beings, it had a physical impact because we couldn't move. It has an emotional impact. It had a psychological impact. And it had a cognitive impact. Because we had to get used to the fact that even though we wanted to move and we wanted to socialize, we couldn't. The previous presenter was talking about the fact that some staff wanted to go back to campus. You couldn't during lockdown. And even after lockdown was sort of relieved and the phase-in approaches started, most of us could still not go back to offices and to our normal work as we knew it before COVID-19. Cognitively, we had to think about how will we do things differently and how will we still be connected to our families, our friends, our colleagues, our students, and all our other social networks and responsibilities. And then finally, when we realize that lockdown is not going to go away and that we still have a long road ahead of us, we had to start finding a balance between our workspace, which was part of our home space. Some of the academics and other staff had to deal with homeschooling, and so we had to learn to juggle work responsibilities, family responsibilities, and all the other responsibilities that we also have. So yes, indeed, lockdown impacted us on many different levels. But I think for me personally, lockdown also provided us with an opportunity to reflect on life, on work, and on how to move from here. And I believe there are also good positives and advantages of lockdown, which I will come back to later. Second question. After the impact and after starting to realize that lockdown is not going to go away, how did we adjust? Especially when all over it was announced that we're going to move to online learning and teaching. After my presentation of last year, when I asked, is higher education ready for online teaching and learning? This year, there was no question about it. Whether we were ready or not, we had to do it. So we started to think about how to make online learning and teaching accessible and conducive for our students. Because for me, that is what education is about, our students, their education and how to empower them. And the one definite thing that lockdown and online learning have brought to the fore is the big divide between the rich and the people who have and the people who don't have. So first and foremost for us was about how can we make our online learning and teaching possible, conducive, and accessible to our students. So we had to think about a different learning and teaching approach, different modes of communication, not only with the students, but also with our staff, our colleagues, our committee works, workshops, and symposiums such as this one. That brings me to my third question. What forms of support were and are provided? For us at UWC, when the announcement was made that we are going to go online, that we are going to work from home, and that we must find ways to help and assist our students, we started, I can remember, the 20th of April, and that week was an orientation week for both the students and the staff. And that helped a little bit, I think. Obviously, before that, we already started to think and to change and to adapt. Then it was followed up with different IT webinars and guidelines on how to use our student learning management system optimally. And if you were an academic like myself, who only use the LMS for announcements, you had to realize that no, you will have to get familiar and familiarize yourself with all the options, all the functions. And I must say, I'm sure similar to Unisa, who's not, unfamiliar with online learning, that the learning systems are very good platforms, and our IT teams here at UWC work with the academics, improve the system, and provided the IT webinars and guidelines on how to use different functions. And today we also have live presentations on what they refer to as the big blue button, where the lectures are recorded. But more importantly also was about how to bring the content and how to make it now accessible, because you couldn't continue with the face-to-face old way. So how to prepare lessons in such a way that students will understand how to have step-by-step instructions for tasks, assignments, quizzes, and the exam. And then we debated, and we still are debating, about the fact that it's all open book now. Students are at home, there's no one who monitor them, and so they can make use of all their resources when they complete assignments, when they complete quizzes, and when they write the exams. So we are still also trying to battle with plagiarism and cheating, possible cheating. Then the staff asked for data provision, which the university allowed. We were also allowed to go fetch whatever we need from our offices. And the university also provided laptops for some of the staff who didn't have. And that's the other thing that I think that is impacting our academic staff and other staff. Because, for example, if your home where you are living perhaps don't have a study, or maybe a dining room where you have a table, or where you can, I know some colleagues work from their garages and stuff, because you need that, that space to do your work at home. So that was another challenge. But I think our staff and all the staff, I think we are creative and we can adapt. And so what the university is doing and our HR is doing and the IT team is doing is to provide ongoing strategies and tips. And I think because we have adjusted, we had to find our own way, because our situations will be different. Our circumstances at home are different. And so we had to find a way to really make it work. Because in the end for us, and what I always tell my team is that, one, we are the lucky ones. We still have work. We can work from home. We're not retrenched. We're not facing certain things. We didn't say you must stay home and you're not getting paid. So let's make it work. And so that's at the moment what we're doing. And also, if you're really stressed out, university provided a toll-free online 24 counseling helpline for both staff and students. Thus, what did we learn from the lockdown? If you looked at the impact, if you look at how we adjusted, and if you look at where we are today, what we definitely learned, what I definitely learned, was that as human beings, we can adjust. And it doesn't even matter if you think you can't. Our makeup and our fabric is such that we adjust sometimes unconsciously, which is a good thing. So it was a change, and we had to make do the best we can. But what it also brought to the fore was the fact that we are social beings, and that for me, which I always believed in, learning and teaching is a socially situated and constructed process. Why I'm saying that? Our students felt that even if the fact that we simplified the lesson plan, simplified the content, had the voice notes and the voiceovers and all that stuff, they still wanted to connect. They still wanted to see us. They still wanted to see a face. Similarly with the staff. And so we asked the staff in the different departments to have a weekly meeting, a Google Hangout or Zoom meeting, where you just simply connect, where you simply hear how's everyone doing, where they can share problems, and where they can, just know and feel that connection. So our social being and the fact that learning and teaching is socially constructed, that came to the fore. And what is good and important, I think, is that the online learning platforms, and because of technology and the advancement, it actually allowed us to have that live lessons, to have that live lectures and tutorials. The students we record them and the students can listen to it afterwards. The students see the faces. They can only come by our platform, speak to us. We can have interactive sessions. So all of that showed us that yes, we definitely can use technology, and we don't have to fear that the face-to-face and that social connectiveness will go away. In fact, it actually enhances and strengthens that. But what we also have learned is that online learning and that preparation and planning and everything that must go into that, it's hard work. In fact, we all agreed at our last meeting that we're working harder now than what we used during face-to-face. So online learning requires more work, and I, for one, is sitting many, many more hours in front of my computer working, because as academics, we not only teach, we not only have to mark assignments and all of that, but we need to publish, we need to supervise, we need to have community engagement. So online learning, we definitely show, and it's a fact now, it's possible, but it's hard work, and more importantly also, it requires much more resources. It requires many different computers and laptops. It required more people. Our university is now in the process of also appointing teaching assistants for lecturers, so that they have somebody who can take over, somebody who can give them a break, and if they too stress out, that can take over. But it also required other resources, as we know, because of our social and economic conditions of some of our students and our staff. They don't have the resources. So yes, online learning is possible, technology enhancements happened and we had to just jump in, but it will and it are and always in future, I think even more so, will require more resources. It is doable. We managed to finish our first semester. We're busy with second semester, and I think our staff has adjusted. We are busy to get used to the new normal. And we're also beginning to realize that there are some advantages. One advantage for me, while it was raining so hard, we didn't have to get up in the rain. We're also saving petrol, so that's an advantage. I will not go into all the other things that we're saving, but it really provided us with a time to reflect and a time to adjust and a time to make do the best we can. And I think moving forward, it can just improve and get better. And what I'm personally glad for and of is the fact that I have seen how we can use technology. And I've also seen that face-to-face contact and that human and social situatedness is still there. And we can just build on that and find a way how to bring the two together even more and how we can then move forward post-COVID. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Venetia. Venetia, are you still with us?
I'm here. I just muted myself. I hope I was in time.
You definitely were. You definitely were, Venetia. We studied at UWC at the same time, and we always refer to you as Slim Macy. Thank you so much for your presentation, Venetia. Especially when we had to look at the physical, emotional, psychological, cognitive, and the balance between it all in lockdown. And I think that is one thing that we all struggled with in the beginning, and some of us are still struggling with that. But thank you so much for giving us a voice of reflection there. Right, so we are moving over to the question and answer part. Remember, we're going to really look at all the presentations here, and so I'm going to give over to my colleague, Mdu. Mdu, any interesting questions being posed?
Oh, thank you very much, Program Director, and thank you to Professor, did you say Slim Lady or something like
Slim
that?
Macy.
Slim Macy, okay. Yeah, that was really interesting. I counted, Program Director, 27 questions altogether. I'm not sure if time is going to allow me to post all those questions or to read out all these questions. But let me start with Professor Maji, who's got one question just at the end when she's about to finish. Professor Makji, the person here wants to ask, how prepared was UWC students in relation to devices and data? And also, have students raised concerns about spaces conducive for studying? Professor Samaji, that's the question that has been asked directly to you. Can you please respond? I'm not saying you should limit in terms of time, but we are working with time here. We still have to go through the other 26 or 25 odd questions. Thank you.
Okay, let me respond. The question was, how prepared was our
Prof? Prof, are you there? Program Director, I think we lost Prof.
Professor McGee, are you still here?
Okay, I don't mind repeating the question afterwards. Can I proceed to interrogate labor?
You
Not
may.
me, but the questions that people have posted. Can I continue? All right. Thank you.
May do.
Okay. To Mr. Hontonti from Nehao, I think I counted 2 questions for you. Let me just look them up.
Connected. I'm really not sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, apologies, I got disconnected. I was saying our students were not prepared. They were not prepared for online learning, and so university had to start to find, money. They started a campaign, and they then started to provide students with laptop and with data. So that was the one question. What was the other one?
Okay, just give me a second, Prof. Oh, it's about space. Did students come to you about concerns for space, which are conducive for study? I think you did mention that some other people didn't have a conducive space to study at home.
Yeah. And it's still a problem for some students. That's why we're busy, remember, with the phase-in approach. So the students who are really, really vulnerable, they were allowed to come in, and the second lot is coming in now. The second phase is busy. But yes, it was a big problem.
Thank you very much, Prof. Can I hear you, Mr. Hontonti? Can I just hear your voice so that I can?
Yes, okay. I'm here.
All right. Question, where is it? The question reads, Mr. Hontonti, Mr. Hontonti also referred to ineffective institutional structures. The question is then, what should the response of the organized labor be to this? That is the first question directed to you. Let me find another one which got your name on it. Okay, the second one, it says, how did organized labor realign themselves as a collective contribute to the alleviation of the challenges highlighted by the DHHT, as Mr. Hontonti mentioned in his presentation? So far, these are the 2 questions. There are other generic questions that you and Johan and perhaps the RD can also answer. But for now, that is the question. Can you please respond, Mr. Hontonti?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. I'm just writing the last one down. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mdu. The response to the ineffective governance structures, and I must say, in my presentation, I did make mention of the fact that these are not diagnoses made relating to the University of South Africa, but this was just a generic diagnosis made relating to the institutions that were then put under administration. But I think importantly, organized labor has a critical responsibility to play when they realize that the governance structures are ineffective, precisely because in many times we have representation in these structures in one way or the other, be it through academic or administrative staff members, or directly through the unions, for instance, in the case of IF, and in Senate, you do have members of staff representing the academic components, who by any measure may be members of one or the other union. So you've got a responsibility when you realize that there is ineffectiveness from the side of governance structures to highlight the risk that is going to cause to the institution, because these are critical bodies of opinion and decision making, who then assist the institutional strategies to move forward. Precisely on the question of the academic program, which is the primary responsibility of the institution. On the second question, how did organized labor respond to the challenges highlighted by DHEAD? Program director, even in that instance, organized labor has had a responsibility. There are times, I would make a case in point with the University of South Africa. There were times where we were in stark contradictions. There were stark contradictions between organized labor and various structures, and as such, organized labor would ensure that governance structures, they are efficient, they are effective, and also they are economical, because if you do not play that responsibility of ensuring that the governance structures of the institution are in check, the institution stands a chance of being eroded or to collapse. And I think one thing that was observed by USAF and DHEAD, the paralysis of governance structures has led to a few institutions of higher learning to be put under administration as a result of the collapse of governance. So it's quite critical, and as organized labor, we did play our role in ensuring that it does not continue, and we assist the institution. Thanks.
What does USAF stand for? Just USAF. I wrote it down, but I don't know what USAF stand for. You can continue answering afterwards. Mr. Watonji?
Sorry, program director. Sorry, program director. I then switched off my what do you call this? But USAF is a forum for universities in South Africa. So that is just a body that and I think our Vice Chancellor is also part. Is part of the leadership of the structure. Sorry for that. I just I could not unmute myself. Thank you very.
All right. Right. The next questions, two questions are directed at Mr. Johan Jonker. Let me find the first one for Mr. Johan Jonker. It says here to APSA, which is represented by Mr. Johan, if campuses remain closed, what's APSA's position regarding students, in particular historically disadvantaged students continuing to be further disadvantaged? Those who do not have access or have access, but their living conditions are not conducive for studying. You can see it's almost the same questions that has been asked to Professor McGee, but we need the Unisa context in this. And then the second question for Mr. Johan Jonker, let me find it up here. Yeah, it says to Johan, you will agree with me, not me, but the person asked the question, that henceforth, post-COVID, it would never be business as usual. So the question is, does labor have a role to play in ensuring that staff are reskilled? I repeat, staff are reskilled in order to adapt to the new normal. JJ, are you there to respond?
I am moderator, thank you. I can respond. On the first question, the issue of campuses being closed or remaining closed, our position is similar to what it's been during lockdown or during hard lockdown, that university needs to assist students, especially from poor communities, etc. You know, when the NSFAS issued funding and so forth, laptops may be provided, but of course there are areas where a laptop might not help you because there's no connectivity perhaps. All of those things, all of those situations need to be accommodated. The number of students that return to campus is of course determined by the Minister of Higher Education. And while it is clear that it would not be 100% soon, it would be in phases, and the focus is on students who do certain research in labs and students who really do not have who really have connectivity challenges, especially due to circumstances. One would assume that a portion of that problem is already being addressed to some extent, but it is our view that more could be done to identify where serious challenges are indeed in that regard. Of course, one cannot go beyond what the regulations or the minister's issues and so forth. And there is the balanced approach that has to be focused on, and that is on one hand saving lives, and on the other hand ensuring that the learning experience is good. One way in which I believe from academic side we can contribute to changes that may be better for students as well, for both the learning experience as well as for teachers, for lecturers having a better empowerment of teaching, is perhaps to opt for more year courses than semester courses, because a semester course has a serious impact in terms of time. If there are constraints, something like a delay has a much worse impact because of the 4-month learning period versus when it is a 10-month learning period. So those are things we would advocate for, but definitely we also engage with student leadership in this regard. So although we have different interests, we sometimes have collaborative interests. That is where the institutional forum is the ideal platform to engage with these things, because that's the only forum in the institution, which I don't think exists in other workplaces like other companies, where both labor, students, let me rather say, both labor representation as well as student representation and management representation is together at the same time. So those type of things one will endeavor to address in that forum. Thank you on that one. Then on the second question, issue of reskilling, the person who questioned may assume too quickly that I will agree with that statement. Yes, it will not be business as usual perhaps, but it also does not imply that it will be extremely different from normality forever. There will be at some stage a adaptation or adaptations to closer to normality, etc. One cannot, in fact, we do see that ourselves as labor play a role with regard to reskilling, of course, in areas where it is unavoidable that maybe positions may be at risk. But our first priority will be to save jobs. Our first priority would be to ensure a balanced approach. There must be justification for this for the new normal to say you take away a job. It's not going to happen automatically just because there's a view that it's not business as usual. Not business as usual is also applicable to the fourth industrial revolution as such. It doesn't mean that as labor we are prehistoric or dinosaurs if we are sometimes resistant towards agreeing easily that things must simply change when it comes to the risk of jobs. But it also does not mean that we are not willing to engage. The biggest issue, I think, from labor side would be it's not going to be accepted. Just like there are way too many employers who has already in this country has taken opportunities inappropriately to use COVID as an excuse for retrenchment. It's not going to, that type of approach will not work in Unisa. It is a different type of organization. There is the two unions together represent more than 60% of the staff. It's a highly unionized environment. What it says in short is, on the one hand, yes, there is a serious realization that things will not be normal at some stage, but we cannot, for example, now agree there's no more need for buildings because we perceive that there will not be a need in the future. All of these things will be paced and having step-by-step type of engagements and so on. That's as a simple example. We cannot just assume that a certain section, because at the moment, for example, exam papers are not printed, you want to assume that no more printing will be done in future. It is premature to get to those type of conclusions. But yes, we will also play a role to ensure that staff who needs to be reskilled will be reskilled. Thank you, moderator.
All right. Thank you, Johan. There are a whole lot of other questions, but I'll try and find room in the closing, in the word of thanks to accommodate. But there's just one question, Program Director, that I must ask because it applies to both the unionists, and it deals with corruption. So I think it's very important that that question gets asked. So the question reads as follows: corruption seems to be a national problem, and fingers have rightfully or wrongfully pointed at organized labor, in particular in relation to the organized labor's political alignment. How does organized labor at Unisa respond to this allegation? And this person asked both unions chairs to respond to this question. So I suggest that we maybe give 1 minute each. Mr. Wonton, you can go first, and Mr. Jonker, take the other minute just to respond quickly. Thank you.
Moderator, thank you very much for that. It's just that the question is confusing because I'm not sure, because corruption is vast. I'm not sure what the person who is asked is talking to, what type of corruption, because in any case, organized labor stands opposed to any form of corruption, and there are instances where organized labor has raised alarms around the question of corruption, and certain decisions were taken, and the fact that fingers are pointing towards organized labor, I'm not sure what type of corruption is that, because from where I am seated, program director, I have not been exposed to any union within the confines of the University of South Africa that has been wrongfully accused or rightfully accused of corruption, be it it's a leader or it's a union. But I think in essence, moderator, our view as organized labor or as unions is that we stand opposed to corruption and all its manifestations, and any time where the ugly head of corruption rears itself, we are the first ones to call for its chopping. So that is the brief response that I could give, but I'd hope that the person who asked the question could have been more prescriptive or direct in the questioning. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Program Director, can I start?
Yes, you can, Johan.
Thank you, Program Director. Let me start by saying that the person who posed the question, I respect the question in the sense that, you know, we must always respect free expression, and it's not a matter of feeling challenged with that question as such. It is a question to be asked. The response to it is as follows. You may find that it's always interesting to see that rumors about such things about corruption within unions escalates at stages when, you know, after strikes and after serious contestation, or when the relationship between the employer and the unions deteriorate and so forth. It's an interesting phenomena that, those type of allegations sometimes or rumors may escalate more. But whenever we allege corruption against anybody, we must also be willing to take allegations seriously when it comes our way. But of course, as my fellow chairperson of the other union says, one needs to respond to more clear allegations. But in a general sense, one is not aware of our own unions, in my own case, my own union, making itself guilty of corruption. None of its structures. But we are always open to if there's a need to investigate, people can request us investigations. There has been communication in the university about certain questions being asked from management side about things. We understand that they may have investigated. We are not aware that they have investigated. Have not been faced with particular challenges as such ourselves yet. So it's maybe just a general question. If you are willing to make allegations, are you also willing to respond to allegations? And indeed, we are there. And any type of allegations that come will never restrain us from ensuring that we still keep on asking the questions if it comes to out there. If any corruption is found, either in the university or within our structures, we will deal with it. But at this stage, it's not possible to respond in the sense of, yes, there is anything, because I'm not aware of anything. And so it's basically just a general denial that there's any such corruption in our union. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Johan. Program Director, Timekeeper has whispered to me that I can still ask 2 questions directed to the RD. And then he should just give us his concluding remarks. RD, are you still there? Dr. Jacobs, are you there?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Dr. Jacobs, very 2 short questions. Somebody asked, and I don't know why people remain anonymous when they ask a very innocent question like, can we open the campuses by the end of this month? That is the first question. And then the other one is that people want to know why Unisa is not clear. What is this tongue twister name? Comorbidities. So it says it's a little bit vague. So it doesn't, if I'm 60, should I come in? Can you please respond on those 2 questions briefly? And then please provide your concluding remarks before I hand over to the program director, and then I give my note of thanks. Thank you.
Mr. Madu, can you just give me the first question there?
Can we open the campuses at the end of September? Do you want the second question as well?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've got both. Thank you very, very much. My communication, and that's what I said right at the beginning when one of the questions that were asked. I've been communicating with our staff on a regular basis, and in May already I said to them that we need to just get our heads around returning back to the campus. But I also mentioned to staff that I will not come back to campus until everything has been ensured that we're COVID-19 ready. And I kept to my word, and I said to them, before we come back to this campus, I am going to get senior management, Labour, and the OHS committee to do a walk around with me to ensure that our campus is ready. I've sent out a communique this week, which we are informed staff members. We are at that point now. We're at the end of this particular week. Our air conditioning will be done, and I hear that APSA had a role to play in fast tracking that. Thank you very much, because the job will be done on our campus by the end of this week. That was the last outstanding matter in terms of our list of COVID-19 requirements that we wanted to complete. So I've sent out a communique, so next Wednesday, the management team plus Labour plus the OHS committee will be doing a walk around to ensure that everything is in place that needs to be in place. Because we're going to do some snagging, we might pick up some things that either parties would like us to improve or change. And I've said that we will then give it a week and a half to ensure that everything is in its right order, and then we will return to campus as per a schedule of 30% per time, which the managers have worked out, and that people will then return to campus in that fashion on the 30th. I am confident that everything has been done that was required of us to do. And so if you ask me if we're going to be ready for the 30th, I'm very confident that that will happen. But we will go through a walkthrough process and an assessment process by the people that I've just said. So that's your first question. The second question is about comorbidities. Man, the COVID-19 regulations and the COVID-19 the government's regulations is very clear about comorbidities and people over the age of 60. The outstanding questions at this moment in time is, and my communique to the staff was just if you're wanting to apply for exemption in terms of comorbidity to be able to work from home, then inform your line manager that that's what you're going to do and which comorbidity area you are going to ask for exemption. And if you feel that you do not want to share that comorbidity area with your line manager, it is going to have to be verified. So it's the only way for people to be consistent in terms of verification. So we are thinking that the mechanism is going to be put in place by the university to verify comorbidities, and then it's a simple matter. What I think is more important is that we need to get clear guidelines for people with comorbidities who are not able to work from for whatever reason. Let's not put reasons there. What's going to happen to them? How are we going to deal with them? For people over 60 who cannot work from home for whatever reason, what are we going to do about that? How are we going to deal with it? And I think it's the whole issue, and one of the colleagues today spoke about, you know, people scared and there's perceptions that they will lose jobs and all of that kind of thing. We need to put those things out in the public domain. We need to put it out there for staff members to say, if you're over 60 and you cannot work from home, this and this and this and this is going to happen. So we need to bite the bullet and we need to make those decisions. And I'm really, I was so glad when I heard that I'm going to be on the same platform as Labour, because I think this is not a management thing alone. I think this is a collective thing that we need to get our staff members, because as you've got a cohort of staff that belong to your Labour unions, I've got cohort of staff that report in my region. So I mean, we both need to have this kind of clarity. And I think both of us, we need to work together to try and resolve this. So those are the two questions that we had. And I think my concluding remark for today is, and it's come out so beautifully from both the unions in their talks today, we have to be reflexive. We can no longer have a long period of time to introduce things, to implement stuff. We're in a situation right now where we need to do it fast and as it happens. And you know what? Let me just say that sometimes we're going to make mistakes. Sometimes being reflexive is going to be risky, but I would rather make a mistake and make the decision than not make the decision. So I'm calling on fellow Labour and all of us as Unisans to go forward. And I'm now talking to the rest of other universities also. Let's be reflexive and get this thing right, because at the end of the day, people can say what they want about lives and all of that, and I agree with it. But at the end of the day, why must students bear the brunt of a pandemic because we are not reflective? Thank you very much, Program Chair. I hope that I've done the concluding remarks and answered those questions for you. I've had a fantastic time. I feel honored to be here, and I feel honored that we were able to make this happen. I will do some of the thanks tomorrow, but thank you very much to everybody who participated. Thank you very much to the Labour who gave up their time during this very trying environment to be part of us. Thank you, Program Director.
Program Director, may I request, since Dr. Jacobs have indicated it's a collective type of thing, maybe the question should have been posed to all of us. Do you mind if we also respond?
You may 30 seconds if you can, JJ.
Yeah, 30 seconds is a little bit difficult, but let me just quickly go and indicate that Dr. Jacobs is correct with regard to the issue of collective. We must remember that the regional, the decentralization of decision making to the regions with regard to the compliance issue and making arrangements for compliance is decentralized, but decision making regarding staff still have a centralized flavor in the sense that there is only one Unisa bargaining forum, and that is the central one. There may be a walkabout, etc., but a walkabout may not be enough because there are issues of certificates, there are issues of confirmation. So, as a region, any directorate who makes decisions should do so with answering certain questions, and those questions need to be answered at that level. The walkabout is, of course, plausible, but it cannot be the be all and end all. There needs to be reporting on compliance, and we must distinguish between a section who confirms that a building is ready and safe, and the question of how many staff, how many, what situation there. So there are two separate considerations: the safety of the building to return, and two, the human resource factor, the human factor as such. So that's just a general statement. And indeed, all of these needs to be done together. Expediency important, but not at the expense of safety of employees, nor at the expense of meaningful engagement between Labour and unions, between Labour and management. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jonker, for that. I'd like to give over to you now for your word of thanks.
Okay, I thought Mr. Hontonti wanted to say something. If he doesn't, then I can continue.
Mr. Hontonti, do you want to add?
Program Director, yes. I just want to strictly within your 30 seconds to say yes, Dr. Jacobs is correct that this is a collaborative issue between all stakeholders. Yes, we have to strike a balance between the student aspirations, the worker aspirations, the university aspirations, as well as the threats that are there. So compliance obviously will be a primary issue of discussion, and obviously no one will agree that staff or students must be brought back to the institution when safety measures have not been put in place. And I think JJ is correct to highlight the fact that in as much as we have got these challenges of students who want to come back, we've got challenges of systems, we've got this or that challenge, it is also important that we put the question of the safety of both staff and students during this period first. So we will obviously at the bargaining forum ensure that certificates of compliance and other related compliance issues are taken good care of in order to ensure the safety of everyone. So Program Director, yes, I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. Du, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you, Program Director. I've been given the task of giving a note of thanks. I will start with you, Program Director, for steering the ship, as well as the crew that's working behind to make sure that this symposium continues to be a success. And I'd like to thank Dr. Janssen, who welcomed us this morning and reminded us what has happened yesterday and what we should anticipate for today from the speakers. Thank you to Dr. Keith Jacobs for reporting on the history of PRP or quality at Unisa and being on the firing line, because he's the one who actually took about almost like 15 questions. But Labour also assisted in addressing some of the questions. Thank you, Mr. Hontonti, for your presentation, which was broad enough, and it actually alerted us to a number of key governance issues. And we suspect that as a social partner in all of this, you are probably telling us some things, some potential dangers within our institutions in terms of governance. Mr. Yonkers or JJ, thank you for letting us know about UBF, which was actually in ICU for a month, and you'll be able to revive it. And today we are lent a new name, WFH, which means I'm working from home. But now how to manage us, that's what Mr. Yonkers said, how to manage us, supervise and measure their output. And he also said that behind the scene, the management was trying to cut our salaries. They intervened as collective labor. And then he also said something about people wanting to come to campus, but because they don't feel productive, and as well as making a point that the sanitizers that we're using come from expired beer from SAB. I can only laugh at that. And then Professor McGee, who always delivers her presentations with sense of humor. She reported on UWC to say they had to juggle family responsibility and work. It was a good time for her and her colleagues to reflect. They used different modes of communication. There was counseling, 24-hour counseling in place for both students and staff. And then students are wanting to have that connection in terms of the platform where they can connect for no reason but just to check on one another. And then she said something very profound to say that it's something about education, that she learned how technology can work, but it remains human-centeredness. And then I think the attendees also need to be thanked. Those who asked the questions and those who attended today. And then what was the other thing? Yeah, we regret that because of time, we could not accommodate all the questions. But presenter, program director, I think you must emphasize the point that the questions that we have published must be addressed by the people who presented, because we made that promise in our chat room. And lastly, just a question for me to say, I was left asking myself why anonymity in the Q&A when I think we're living in a democratic society. Are there any our hard-fought liberties being threatened? I don't know. A lot of the questions, I think about 90% were anonymous. So for me, there's something wrong there. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mdu. Thank you so much for today. Let us just look at some of the, tomorrow is Friday the 11th of September, and we've got a very interesting program tomorrow. Let us look at it quickly. There will be Dr. Let me just look on the screen here. We've got Professor Chris Winberg from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology that will be talking about pedagogies of well-being in a pandemic and other crises. Then we've got Dr. Zaid Wahid, and he's going to talk about a framework for MOOCs in Southern in South African higher education. Nompilo Chuma, Dr. Nompilo Chuma, she's talking about humanizing online postgraduate supervision during a crisis. Ms. Adrienne van Gas from the Two Oceans Graduate Institute, a private institution, will be thinking outside of the box and talk about reinventing work-integrated learning or teaching practice in a time of crisis. And then Dr. Kasturi Bahari Leek, she will be talking about professional readiness and socially aware responsiveness during the pandemic. So those are some of the very interesting presentations that will follow tomorrow. So I hope that you can all join us tomorrow for a fun-filled or intellectually filled program for tomorrow. Without further ado, it's goodbye from me, and stay safe and sanitize and be safe. Bye-bye.